been on the internet before on a podcast, and so I'm thrilled to be here. I'm a little nervous, but we'll enjoy it tonight. Say hi to my wife. I know she's watching right now, so I got to give a little shout out there. I am a marriage and family therapist. I have a private practice in Oklahoma City, and I mainly see couples. I do lots of couples work, but I also work out at Arcadia Trails in Edmond, which is a 90-day substance abuse recovery program. And I go in there a few days a week and lead some groups, and I really enjoy that. And so one of the main reasons that I'm an expert at substance abuse and recovery is because I are one. I have 7 years, 24 days, 11 hours, 5 months, 5 minutes and 13 seconds of sobriety. And so a lot of my experience comes from lived experience and the misery of going through an addiction with my family and having to get out of that and figure out how to get out of that. And so family is very important to me. And once I got out of a 30 or 90-day program of my own, I decided to go back to school and become a therapist so I could help others. And so today I do want to talk about substance abuse treatment and family therapy, because there's a lot of treatment centers in America, a lot of treatment centers in Oklahoma and in surrounding states, and there's different modalities on how to address substance abuse. And so my thesis is that the family has a central role to play in the treatment of any health problem, but it includes substance abuse. And so a primary challenge is the need to broaden the substance abuse treatment focus so that it includes the individual, but it also includes the family. And so on January the 10th, 2013, I walked into a treatment center in Fort Worth, and on Sunday nights they had a family night, and the families would come in and we'd all sit around in a family group. And to tell you the truth, for 90 days, I never thought about bringing my family in. My family didn't come. My wife, she was down in Houston. She couldn't come. And as a matter of fact, I probably didn't want them there. I was going through a very difficult time in my life, but I noticed other family members were coming. And I even noticed that there were some family members that were coming to individuals or family sessions with their therapists. I never did that. And as I've grown in my sobriety, I've realized what I missed there in being able to include my family in that therapeutic process. Because one of the things that I do today is I help individuals get sober with the help of their families, and it's very important. But there's two different disciplines we're talking about here today, and that's family therapy and substance abuse treatment. And they both bring different perspectives to the treatment implementation. Substance abuse treatment, for instance, the client is the identified patient. He or she is the person in the family with the presenting substance abuse problem. In family therapy, the goal of treatment is to meet the needs of all the family members. And so family therapy addresses the interdependent nature of family relationships and how these relationships serve the individual patient and other family members for the good or sometimes for the bad. So one of the main things that family therapy does in substance abuse treatment is it intervenes with the family in a relational way. And it's almost, I like the word punctuate. And so when I punctuate something, I focus specifically on something. And when I do family therapy treatment or sessions, what we'll do is we'll slow down time a little bit, and we'll focus in on one specific thing, and we'll get the family's input on all aspects of that one specific thing that we've kind of spread out and slowed down. Because family therapy rests on a systemic perspective, and each family member has a different perspective on what's going on in the family. Changes in one part of the system can and do produce changes in other parts of the system. These changes can contribute in the positive and or negative way. And so with family therapy involved in substance abuse treatment, what we're trying to do is find a positive outcome by addressing the whole family. It's a complex role that families can play in substance abuse treatment. Families provide a source of help. And if there's anyone that needs help during that time, it's that identified patient. It's that son, that daughter, that mom, that dad, that grandfather, that niece, that nephew. And families can be the source of that help in the treatment process. But they also must manage the consequences of the individual patient's addictive behavior. And so it can be tricky, it can be heartbreaking, it can be hurtful and difficult for family members to get involved. But individual family members are concerned about the individual patient's substance abuse problem. That's one of the main things that they have in common, that they're concerned about their loved one. But they also have their own goals, and they also have their own issues. And so when we take the systemic approach with family therapy in addressing substance abuse problems, we're not just focusing on substance abuse problems, we're focusing on the family and whatever concerns that may arise. Providing services to the whole family can improve treatment effectiveness. Meeting the challenge of working together will call for mutual understanding. It does call for flexibility, adjustments among the substance abuse treatment provider, the family therapist, and the family. And so I have oftentimes heard other therapists say, oh my gosh, you're a family therapist. I have trouble just doing therapy with one person, and you're doing therapy with the whole family? Well, absolutely. I wouldn't have it any other way, because when I'm able to hear a family member and what's going on with them in their life, it also impacts the whole family and causes some reactions and interactions with each other that do mighty things. I strongly hold that change is better with the family involved. And so it does require a strong focus on the systemic interactions of the family. There are many divergent practices that must be reconciled. For example, a substance abuse counselor typically facilitates treatment goals with the client, correct? Thus, the goals are individualized, focused mainly on the client. This reduces the opportunity to include the family's perspective and or goal setting procedures, which could facilitate the healing process for the family as a whole. When families are considering substance abuse treatment for a family member, there are some important questions that I believe that should be asked. And so if you're considering a loved one that may be going into treatment, I think that there's some questions that you could ask, because there's several treatment facilities that say they're family friendly and say they take a family perspective. Some of the questions I would ask would be, will substance abuse treatment include family therapy? Will it include the family? And can you describe what the systemic approach will look like in treatment? What will the family systemic approach in this treatment center look like when it comes to the treatment of our son or daughter or father or whoever it may be? Another question, what opportunities will the family have to attend family therapy sessions? And I know that oftentimes there are different things that family members can go to, like group sessions. Oftentimes those are educationally based. And that's not exactly what we're talking about here. We're talking about family therapy and being able to be in a room with your family and dealing with the specific issues that need to be dealt with. And so working out ways for the two disciplines to collaborate also will require a reexamination of some assumptions in both the fields. So substance abuse counselors often focus on the individual needs of people with substance abuse disorders, urging them to take care of themselves. And as a family therapist, I encourage my individual husband or the individual wife or the individual child in the family to I promote self-care all the time. But when we're going to a treatment center, oftentimes it can be so individualized that it forgets to include and incorporate the family in the broader perspective. And so this viewpoint neglects to highlight the impact of these changes that the changes will have on other people when the person leaves the treatment facility. When the identified patient is urged to take care of himself, he often is not prepared for the reactions of the family members to the changes that he experiences. Oftentimes I've seen it where a man or a woman will come to treatment and they're really working through some stuff. But then they go home and their spouse or their loved one or their partner doesn't know how to deal with the changes that they've gone through because there's not been a focus on the family in family therapy. On the other hand, many family therapists have hoped to bring about positive changes in the family system, concurrently wanting to improve the substance abuse disorder. But this view tends to minimize the persistent, sometimes overpowering process of addiction. And so if the family therapist is trying to seek simply positive changes in the family, it can minimize the deep wounds and the deep scars and the deep pain that's involved in substance abuse. So both of these views are consistent with the respective fields, and each has explanatory power. You can explain why these views are important, but neither one of them is wrong, but neither one of them is complete either. Addiction is a major force in people with substance abuse problems. People with substance abuse problems also reside within a powerful context that includes the family system. And so it is in an integrated substance abuse treatment model based on family therapy, both family functioning and individual functioning play important roles in the change process. So let's talk about the characteristics of the family really fast. Families possess what I call non-summativity. That's a big word. You might want to Google that one. But it means that the family as a whole is greater than and different from. So non-summativity, the family as a whole is greater than and different from the sum of the individual members of that family. And so it's very important to recognize because the sum is greater than the parts. And so when the sum can have an impact on individuals in the family, there's a greater chance for change. The behavior of individual members is interrelated through the process of circular causality. And I love this word, circular causality, which holds that if one family member changes his or her behavior, the others will change as a consequence, which in turn causes the subsequent changes in the member who changed initially to make changes again, good or bad. And so an example might be of a lady who has some children, and she's been raising her kids for all their lives, and they're grown now and almost out of the house. But the history of her system, her family system, is that she's lived in chaotic relationships. She's lived in toxic relationships. And so one day this lady goes, "This is ridiculous. I don't want to live in a toxic relationship anymore." And so she takes her kids and she moves out and she rents a house. And she does it for 6 months. And as a matter of fact, the 6 months are very peaceful. But after 6 months, she comes up with an excuse. She says she can't afford it. And so she moves back in with the man that she previously lived with a toxic relationship. What's interesting is that in this circular causality, what was really going on is that this mom didn't know how to live with peace. She had lived in a chaotic system for so long, in a chaotic system for so long, that when she did experience peace, she didn't know what to do with that peace. And so circular causality is very important when it comes to substance abuse. Each family member has a pattern of communication traits, which can be verbal or nonverbal, overt or subtle means of expressing emotion, conflict, affection. Families strive to achieve homeostasis, which portrays family systems as self-regulating with the primary need for balance. And so all systems are trying to correct themselves and trying to run in the smoothest way fashion. And in the world of therapy, we call this homeostasis, and trying to move to stay on a steady line, to stay self-regulated as a family. And so there was a woman and a man one time, and their child had been taken by DHS because of drugs in the family. The man and the woman were using drugs, and their lives were devastated because they lost their child to DHS. And so the mother and the father, they just said, we're going to work so hard. We've got to get our child back. And the wife, she stops using drugs, and it was marijuana. And the husband stops for a few days, but then he's not really serious, and the addiction has got him, and he decides to continue using marijuana. And they're supposed to come into therapy, but only the wife will show up, and the husband won't come because he's not ready to change. Well, the therapist says, tell me about your husband. And so the wife begins to tell about the husband and what type of personality he has. And she finds out during that time that the husband does not like to have his problems aired out for the public to see. And this has been very difficult for him because DHS knows, his family knows, her family knows, so everybody knows about his problems. And he is a very private guy and doesn't want anybody to know that he uses drugs. And so the therapist says, well, I've got an idea. Let's do something paradoxical. Let's inject some paradox into this whole thing and see what happens. And so the therapist says, what I want you to do is I want you to, the next time that your boyfriend says he's going to go over to so-and-so's house to smoke marijuana, what I want you to do is I want you to go stand behind his car, and I want you to put some underwear on your head. And I want you to start waving your arms and singing a song, whatever song you want. It could be Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. But the therapist said, I want you to sing it so loud that the neighbors can hear. And so she goes home, and sure enough, the husband says, hey, I'm going to go over to Billy Bob's and I'm going to smoke some marijuana with him. I'm not going to do it here, but I'm going to go do it at Billy Bob's. And so the wife, she goes out to the front yard, she puts some underwear in her head, she stands right behind his car, and she starts singing, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And she's singing loud. And her husband says, what are you doing? What are you doing? Stop that. And he grabs her by the arm and says, let's go inside. Let's go inside. And the client comes back to the therapist the next week, and the therapist says, what happened? Oh, he didn't like that. Oh my gosh, that was horrible. And she said, oh, therapist, I got to tell you something else. He stopped using marijuana that day. He stopped. And then the weird thing that happened was he also started doing the dishes. The wife said, I didn't make him do the dishes. I didn't even ask him to do the dishes. And he vacuumed the floor. And so what had happened is, by throwing this paradox, by throwing this injunction, injecting it into the relationship, this family system, they were able to cause him to stop using marijuana. And he was successful at not using marijuana for 2 weeks. And then you know what he did? He decided to move out. He decided to leave his family and leave his child, and because he chose marijuana. But you know something? The wife said, you know something, that really tells me a lot. And I know that this is for the best, because I know that I'm going to get my child back. And she did. She got her child back. And so this homeostasis thing, when she went out and stood at the end of the driveway in front of his car, she caused the self-regulation to just haywire. It just went berserk. And he didn't like that. And so it caused some change. And so we have the whole of the family, the sum of the family is greater than the individual parts. And what can happen is that we begin to see changes happen when the whole system can change. The person, the identified patient with substance abuse problem, can then begin to approach life differently, look at life differently. And so this homeostasis is a very interesting thing. I want to read you a little case study. A young couple married when they were both 20 years old. One spouse developed alcoholism during the first 5 years of the marriage. The couple's life increasingly became chaotic and painful for another 5 years. When finally, at the age of 30, the substance abusing spouse entered treatment and, over the next 18 months, attained a solid degree of sobriety. Suddenly, lack of communication and difficulties with intimacy came to the forefront for the non-abusing spouse, substance abusing spouse, who now often feels sad and hopeless about the marital relationship. The non-substance abusing spouse finds after 18 months of the partner's sobriety that the sober spouse is no longer fun or still does not want to make plans for another child. We know that almost all young couples encounter communication and intimacy problems for the first 10 years of their marriage. In an alcoholic marriage or relationship, such issues are regularly pushed into the background as guilt and blame and control issues are exacerbated, made larger by the nature of addictive disease and its effects on both the relationship and the family. And so the homeostasis of what would seem to be a sober family can cause the self-regulation of the person that wasn't using drugs or alcohol to go haywire in itself. And so once again, the importance of family therapy to deal with not only the substance abusing partner's abuse, but also the wife or the non-substance abusing partner. So family therapy is a collection of therapeutic approaches that share a belief in the family level assessment and intervention. A family is a system, and in any system, each part is related to all of the other parts. Consequently, a change in any part of the system can and will bring about changes in all the parts. Therapy based on this point of view uses the strengths of families to bring about change in a range of diverse problem areas, including substance abuse. Family therapy in substance abuse treatment has two main purposes. First, it seeks in substance abuse treatment it seeks to use the family's strengths and resources to help find or develop ways to live without substance abuse. Secondly, it decreases the impact of chemical dependency on both the identified patient and the family. Frequently in this process, it marshals the family's strengths and it requires the provision of basic support for the family. And I think back to my stint, my forced vacation, my 90-day vacation at a drug and alcohol rehab facility in Texas. And I realized that I missed that now. I missed the ability for my family's strengths and resources to help me in that process. And then I also missed the impact of chemical dependency on both me and my family and being able to discuss that and utilize that. And so when I got home, when I got out, I was back around my wife and my children and my parents and my wife's parents. And you know something? They didn't know what to do with me. They didn't know what to do with a sober Scott because we hadn't taken a systemic approach, a family approach to sobriety and staying sober. And so my parents really had to figure it out. My in-laws really had to figure it out. My wife really had to figure it out. What do we do now with a sober Scott? Oftentimes there's much worry because there was no impact of family therapy. Then the child gets out of treatment and everybody in the family is worried that they're going to relapse. And so there's this new dynamic, there's this new level of discontentment, this positive feedback that takes us away from homeostasis and causes the family to be stressed out and worried that the person is going to fall back into substance abuse. A distinction should be made too that there's a difference between family therapy and family involved therapy. Family involved therapy attempts to educate families about the relationship patterns that typically contribute to the formation and continuation of substance abuse. Whereas it differs from family therapy in that family is not the primary therapeutic grouping, nor is there an intervention in the system of the family relationship. Most substance abuse treatment centers offer such a family educational approach. Oftentimes you'll see a family night. I've seen several facilities that do a Sunday night family night, and it's more of a group session. There are also substance abuse facilities that will do a family night and the patient's not even invited. It's just the family members that meet with other family members. And so there needs to be a strong shift in the way that we approach substance abuse and recovery, in that we include the family system as that, because oftentimes there are family issues that need to be resolved. Oftentimes the reason that the identified patient is struggling with alcohol or drugs is because of family issues, because of unmet needs, because of abandonment issues, because of attachment issues. And so the family needs to be able to be there to solve those things. It typically is limited to psychoeducation to teach the family about substance abuse, related behaviors, and behavioral, medical, and psychological consequences. And so these are all good things. These are all psychoeducational things, and they're very quality things that many of us need to know. As a matter of fact, we're doing psychoeducation right now. But fortunately, we're doing psychoeducation about family involvement, family systems, and family therapy when it comes to being a part of our loved ones' recovery attempts and successes. There's several different kinds of family therapy modalities. And back in the 50s was when marriage and family therapy really kind of took off. And it added a systemic focus to previous understandings of the family. I've already mentioned it's a whole system is more than just the sum of its parts. Parts of a systems are interconnected. We know that in families that each part is interconnected, interwoven. Certain rules determine the functioning of a system. You look at your family, there are family rules. There are rules that are unspoken. Nobody needs to say them out loud because everybody understands. Those are just the family. That's the way we do family. That's our normal. Systems are dynamic, carefully balancing continuity against change. And so even in the most chaotic or toxic families, dysfunctional families, there's this balancing act that tries to carefully find a homeostasis, even though for another family, they might go, wow, that's very dysfunctional. Promoting or guarding against system entropy, system death, is a powerful dynamic in the family system, balancing change of the family roles and rules. And so being able to look at those roles, look at those family rules, and be able to reframe and come at those family roles and family rules from a different perspective, maybe coming in the side door or coming in the back door, and realizing that there's different ways that we can approach how we do family. And so one of my favorite types of family therapy is this strategic, having a hard time saying that, the strategic school of family therapy. In this modality, introduced two of the most powerful insights in all of family therapy over the years. First of all, family members often perpetuate problems by their own actions. And secondly, um, directives tailored to the needs of a particular family can sometimes bring about sudden and decisive change. So family members often perpetuate problems. It's like, two brothers when they're young, and they're riding in the back seat and they're on vacation, and mom and dad's having to yell at them the whole time because they won't stop hitting each other. The older brother knows how to get under the younger brother's skin. The other younger brother knows how to mimic and copy everything the older brother says. And so they're always jabbing at each other. And so family members often perpetuate problems. And so mom and dad finally say, if you don't stop bugging each other, I'm going to stop the car. And so oftentimes, even when we're grown, even when families don't have children and they're growing up, young adults, families can still perpetuate problems within that system. And then, but also there can be directives that are tailored to the needs of specific families that sometimes bring sudden change. It's like throwing a rock. Could be rather small rock, and you throw it in a pond. But that one rock changes the entire ecosystem. And so strategic therapy is very interesting. And I was talking about paradoxical injunctions earlier, and that's a part of strategic therapy. And then also Mnuchin, a guy by the name of Salvador Mnuchin, he's one of my heroes. He came along with a guy named Dr. Fishman, and they invented structural family therapy. And the concept behind structural family therapy is to create structure in the family, right? And so the major principles of this model include specific attention to building sound, that's different. I was reading the wrong line. So, but the thing that they do in structural therapy is actually the mom and dad need to be able to provide a better structure in the home. And sometimes whether the children are children or they're grown children, still providing that structure in the home can be very beneficial. And so structural therapy has an incredible approach to family systems. And then a theory and a model that I follow personally is the Gottman couples therapy model. And that model is based on 40 years of research. And the major principles of this model include specific attention to building sound relationships. And so the model is specific towards couples in having couples build these sound relationships together. But in 2017, the Gottman Institute also came out with a deeper modality to work with couples and addiction recovery. And this model brings a greater utility to the systemic approach that family therapy is grounded in. And so it's exciting to be able to, because there's been thinking throughout the generations as recently as 10, 20 years ago, that as recently as today, that if you have a loved one that is struggling with substances, that you send them to Florida, or you send them to California to a rehab center, you send them away. And so when we can figure out how to work with couples and families without sending people away, there's still the possibility of doing inpatient treatment, but doing an inpatient treatment that strongly focuses on family therapy so that the family can get something out of this as well. And so, Derek, that's about the conclusion of what I had to say. How much time have we used tonight?
Great. We've about wrapped up. Just let me go ahead and open it up for anybody that might have any questions for Scott about any of the information that he was talking about. So as for now, we will enjoy the awkward pause while we see if anybody has anything they want to ask.
I didn't bring any jokes. I'm sorry.
Right. Scott, if anybody's interested in getting in touch with you, maybe they want to reach out to you to come in and do some work, go ahead and give everybody your information.
Sure. One of the best ways to get a hold of me is my website, and it's real simple to remember. It's just okcfamilytherapy.com. So that's one of the best ways to get a hold of me. I've got an office over on 23rd in Uptown, and I do primarily see couples. I see couples who have addiction problems. One spouse or one partner has an addiction problem, and so I do specialize in working with couples. And so my phone number is 405-662-1557. But just do an internet search for www.okcfamilytherapy.com, and you can get to me really fast and have all my information.
So that link is in the Facebook thread.
Yeah.
I just added it.
Good.
Oh man, I can't stop sneezing tonight.
That's all
Okay,
right.
so final call for any questions for Scott.
I want to thank you for having me tonight, Derek. I really enjoyed being here.
Oh, here's a question real quick, Scott. Is there a difference in how family therapy should be applied in the outpatient setting versus the inpatient setting?
That's a good question. I worked for 3.5 years in an outpatient facility in Oklahoma City. And, one of the things that I utilized, there was the facility that I was at, there was very limited marriage and family therapists. And so I worked extra hard to develop some relationships and rapport with the administration that I was working under in order to bring in families. Unfortunately, I worked on a contract that dealt with DHS families who had lost their children. And so it was kind of a natural shift where I could bring not just the wife in or the female in, I could bring in the partner as well, and or the husband, or and that was a wonderful thing. And some of the funnest things that we discovered was that when the parents would get a visitation, they would like to bring their kids in, and so they'd bring in their kids for family therapy sessions. And so outpatient setting, if you're doing like an intensive outpatient program at one of the agencies here in Oklahoma City, absolutely, you need to ask, you need to talk to somebody at that facility and say, is there somebody that works with families here, somebody that could work with not just me, but my spouse or my partner, or my children, and see if they have that any type of family program available.
All right. Thank you for that question, Scott. Appreciate you being here.
Absolutely.
All right. That's me. So thanks again, Scott, for being here. I think that was great information. Remember, be back here 2 weeks from tonight on the 17th at 7 p.m. Anna Langford, who's the program director at Teen Recovery Solutions with Oklahoma City Sober High School, will be talking to us about how to support long-term recovery in your child. So until then, everybody take care. Be careful with the snowpocalypse, I guess. So thank you, everybody. We appreciate it.